gaslighting your way to responsible AI. This is a current trend that we're seeing across many universities, elite universities, also corporations, where they take the helm and say, we're going to create a symposium or we're going to do thought pieces on what responsible AI is. The problem is that they're gaslighting you. And let's talk about the ways these institutions are gaslighting you and why they've been corrupted. So, first up, we have the recent case here with Meta, where in court documents, they've been accused of doing criminal acts, allegedly. 82 terabytes of pirated books for AI training. And also, they were aware that this was a criminal act because they knew that this pirated data was going to be beyond their ethical threshold, to quote an article from Tom's Hardware. And also, they mentioned that Mark Zuckerberg himself, the CEO of Meta, attended the meeting and said, we need to move this stuff forward. We need to find a way to unblock all of this. So if you think about this, this is leading by example from the top, right? He's telling his employees, look, I'm unethical. I want you to do unethical things. In fact, I want you to do allegedly criminal things. And then later, the Meta employees sent a message to each other and said, look, we're concerned about Meta IP addresses being used to load pirated content. We're torrenting from a corporate laptop, and that doesn't feel right. And they made a joke about it. So this is the classic stuff that you see in books like The Smartest Guys in the Room from Enron, where people are encouraged to do criminal behavior. The leaders of the company are basically giving them the green light, and people joke about it, and then later they get caught. So this is a good example of an organization that says they do responsible AI. They have people talking in industry about it. And if you dig deeper, there's even more troubling things. One of the things that has surfaced recently is the book The Tech Coup, where they talk about in the book that many of the European lawmakers were tried to be influenced by Meta. Come over to the headquarters, we'll talk to you, but a lot of it was just an influence campaign. And what's happening is that by companies reframing a conversation to do what they want it to do, that's how they gaslight you with this responsible AI scenario. Meanwhile, if we look at Meta, they have rampant misinformation, disinformation. There's been accusations of encouraging genocide on the platform. We have examples with Cambridge Analytica, where actually democracy itself was circumvented because they were able to target a wide variety of people illegally by capturing their data, and there were big consequences for that as well. And if you look at the core problem of a platform like Meta, is they're focused on engagement, and they're focused on generating the most amount of revenue possible, not on responsible AI. But what they do is they infiltrate institutions like Congress. If you look at Open Secrets, we have hundreds of millions of dollars donated to Congress. And we also look at institutions, elite universities, and also nonprofits like Python Software Foundation, also Linux Foundation. They donate the money to legitimize their unethical practices. Now, what this is called is gaslighting. And gaslighting refers to making you feel like you're crazy by talking about the truth. And the truth is that 2 and 2 isn't 5, to quote 1984. War isn't peace. If you have a platform that erodes democracy, if you're an oligarch who is essentially working together with different political leaders to circumvent democracy, you're not doing responsible AI. You're in fact making irresponsible AI. Now, if we look at some of the playbooks for these kinds of organizations gaslighting you and telling you they're doing responsible AI and they're not, this is really the playbook of both the food industry and also the tobacco industry. Let's talk a little bit about the food industry because I have some experience. I have a bachelor's degree in nutritional science. And so I've spent a lot of time really tracking the food industry. I've done research. I've done research on my own body. I did some research when I was in school where we were able to take vitamin supplements and then centrifuge our blood and take urine samples and figure out how much we absorbed. And so I've had some really fun experiences with nutrition from a very scientific standpoint. And one thing that we've learned is that the food industry has also been gaslighting people for quite some time about sugar and also ultra processed food. There's in longitudinal studies, there's a direct link with ultra processed food and obesity. Also, we see there's a direct link as well with sugar, right, which is a processed ingredient. In the 1970s, there was a book that came out by an academic called Sugar, Pure, White, and Deadly. And in fact, he was completely gaslit, and he ended his career in shame because the food industry were working against him because they didn't want the truth to come out. So that's really the playbook: is if you tell the truth, big American corporations will take you out. Likewise, if we see with tobacco, it's also the playbook we've seen as well, where they would go to physicians. They knew there were studies that linked tobacco to cancer, but they told doctors to encourage people to smoke because it was healthy. And so doctors would then go to people and tell them to smoke. We know that there's a direct correlation with smoking and lung cancer, amongst other cancers. So this playbook has been there for quite some time. Currently, though, the tech companies are the ones that are doing this playbook. Now, let's look at another example of irresponsible AIs that we see that the tech companies that are earning the profit doing these really unethical things, they're also engaged in increasing income inequality. And let's describe a few of the ways that they do this. One of them is that they're illegally competing because they have monopoly power. If you look at things like Google or Meta, Facebook, they've been allowed to become trillion-dollar companies when they should have been broken up. A good example would be Facebook initially was a mediocre product at best. It was people clicking cows and doing Farmville things, and it really kind of a janky platform. But they were allowed to buy a competitor, an up-and-coming competitor, Instagram, and that really put them on the map. Also, they were allowed to buy a very successful technology company called WhatsApp that had 1 billion users, and they were built in a very innovative technology called Erlang, and also that allowed them to continue. So instead of being made to compete in a fair way, you've been able to get all of this power centralized with a company like Meta, and then now they're, with this illegal monopoly power, putting money into Congress, corrupting elite universities, and also going to nonprofits and delivering this message. So when you hear, especially Meta, or you hear other companies, big tech companies, talk about responsible AI, they're gaslighting you, just like the food companies gaslit us with ultra-processed food and sugar, and we have historical records of that, and also how the tobacco companies have gaslit us with these things as well. So we see, in fact, the same playbook from tobacco. And if we look at the reputation of a company like Meta, the reputation is very similar to Philip Morris or these other tobacco companies. People know that it's a shady product, that they do a lot of things that hurt humanity at scale. And so that's why there's such an emphasis on, donating to nonprofits, going to elite universities, doing talks, claiming you're doing responsible AI, when in fact your platform is spreading misinformation, disinformation. You have monopoly power. You're monetizing these kinds of things, and you're also eroding trust in institutions and eroding democracy itself. So don't fall for the playbook of big tech companies or even universities are going to be the leaders in responsible AI. It's going to require critical thinking skills, and also finding places like Europe, finding nonprofits that are truly looking into the details of what responsible AI is and how it works. Now, let me talk about one final subject that's also a subject that people are being gaslit on, and that's that AI is being touted as something that's more powerful than it really is. It's, in essence, the generative AI tools with large language models are kind of like a fancy search engine. That's probably the best way to describe them. If you put, let's say, 200,000 tokens into a prompt with Google Gemini, it's pretty good at finding some patterns and giving you some suggestions back, but that isn't logic. And we see a little bit of some beginnings of logic with reinforcement learning and these other approaches from DeepSeek. But what we do see is that there's a pattern of also unethical behavior, which is claiming things that are not true, deliberately lying about the capabilities of something. That would be, in my book, called irresponsible. So if you're claiming something that's not true and then you're making money from it, it's fraud. And a good example of this would be full self-driving. We know that many companies have claimed that full self-driving works, but if the two things can't be true, that the current deep learning technology is not capable of logic, and also full self-driving is true, right? Those are incompatible things. We see that with deep learning. We see that, in fact, they're pretty good at doing, fancy searches, but they make a lot of mistakes. So it's not possible that full self-driving is going to be autonomous and has consciousness. The full self-driving systems are just pattern matching systems, just like large language models. So that's yet another angle. You see this with OpenAI, you see this with Tesla, you see this with many other companies, that they're unproven claims about the capabilities of their technology. So I think, to really close things out here, whenever you hear the word responsible AI, you're being most likely lied to. And when you hear about ethical AI, most likely you're being lied to as well. How can we know? Well, we can use critical thinking. We can look back at the historical record of American technology companies and know that this is a pattern that they do. Now, what is the answer for this? Instead of just being completely negative, because there are some good things about technology, the answer is that you have to have trust in institutions. The institutions can't be corrupted by donations and influence like they are in America. And in fact, if you're able to have people who are independent thinkers, who have the ability to question what the narrative is on a particular subject, and also you have sensible government regulation, it doesn't mean you need to go overboard and stop people from making progress, or you need to add bureaucracy, but you have sensible regulation. That's the way you can actually have responsible AI. But for now, in my opinion, if you hear the words responsible AI, it's going to be irresponsible AI.